tell me when it comes on. All right, guys, welcome back for another one of our East Oaktober month journey. We don't even like to call it a challenge. We want to call it a journey. We're all working together to try to get better or try new things that we're afraid to try when we're actually painting something that matters to us. So this is all about being okay with failing, to learn, just it's truly throwing spaghetti at the wall to try to figure out new things to do. Today, for those of you who are not Alla Prima painters, we want you to join us, even if you are an Alla Prima painter, but you want to try something new and different in your Alla Prima format. This day is for you. So we are going to get started. Today we have Evie next to me. So you can say hi, Evie.
Hi, everybody.
And you can also say hi to that camera here in a second. And then and we also have Erica Arcuti on the switcher board. So she will be with us, asking us the questions that you're asking us. Tell us where you're from, what you're doing. Looking forward to it. I was on Discord last night and saw all the people posting their stuff. Everything is so lovely. Please join the Discord if you haven't yet. Show us what you're working with. We're really excited. So, all right, without further ado, we're gonna get started. There's a few more camera problems I'm kind of working out to make sure we can get that taken care of. So Evie's going to get started. I'm going to try to work on one of the camera issues, and we'll go from there. All right. So Evie, what are you working on today? Is it a panel that you're working on, or is it?
It is panel. It's a little ACM panel. I like to prep mine with just gold and acrylic gesso. I find that it actually does a really nice job, and I like sort of like the velvety smoothness that it's got. So, you know, if you're someone that's kind of like a little nervous to do like a lead ground prep, I feel like this is a good alternative. And today I've got a bunch of pumpkins that I'm going to be painting. I found the one orange pumpkin in the front with its little like curly top. I found at the grocery store, and I impulse purchased it because I was like, I cannot leave this store without this pumpkin. I'm very excited to paint it.
All right, everyone. Well, the camera angle that I have on Evie's palette doesn't seem to be pulling up right now. We'll give it another go here in a little while, but until then, you're going to be able to see Evie and her painting in the still life. And when I get that other shot up, I will let you know. All right, I'm gonna choose a panel. So yesterday I worked on a warmer toned panel. I think today I'm going to work on a cooler toned panel. So, because there's so much warmth in this painting, it actually in a way will help me make the warmth more vibrant. So, this is the last day I'm going to be working on this still life setup. Evie changed hers up just a touch, seeing that we're having different artists each day working on their side. So she's got herself a few extra new pumpkins up there. You got that pumpkin, right? The one that's the orange one?
Yeah. Yeah, I just got it from the local grocery store. So for any of y'all out there that, you know, are wanting to join us in painting some sort of like seasonal items, pumpkins are great, gourds, you know, all the seasonal yummy goodness.
So my wife every year has been making pumpkin chili in this season. Now, chili is one of my absolute favorite foods. I like it every way people make it. And anyway, she makes a version of chili that she found online. It got like huge reviews, and she's like, I'm gonna try this pumpkin chili. It's like, wow, I love that. Sounds totally different, and I'm down for it. It is so good. Something about the pumpkin in it, and she uses they called sugar pumpkins, is that right? Or something like that.
The little ones?
Yeah,
like
the
they're
ones you
super
make for
round?
pumpkin pie. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what they're called. Yeah.
And you put them in there, and it makes the chili like have more of a creamy texture to it. And it is so good. I think it's my favorite chili she makes. So she's pretty darn good at making chili.
You know, I think that means that you might have to make chili for us now.
Oh, absolutely.
My favorite thing
100% make
is
chili for you.
toasted pumpkin seeds. Have you ever done that?
Oh.
Or roasted, I guess.
Actually, did you do that for us when we did Halloween party one year? Maybe that was Kristen.
No, I made
We
the
did a
spooky
pumpkin-
charcuterie last year.
That's right. So last year we did a Halloween party, and this is how much fun East Oaks is. We have like fun little get-togethers and potlucks often. And Evie, the sort of the theme of the night is that you had to wear something on your head. So people wore like cat ears and
I think
horns.
Tina had like horns.
Yep.
Yeah.
And anyway, people got very creative. Parisa and I were thing 1 and thing 2. So we wore these like little blue antenna, like Dr. Seuss antenna on our heads. But the food theme was the food had to look gross but taste good. Like it had to look like it was Halloween-y or scary or something.
Spooky food.
Spooky food. And so Evie made a charcuterie board and put it over, what kind of a skull was it?
It was a plastic skull that, that like before I came to East Oaks, I would use, you know, to study from. And I covered it up in like saran wrap, and I put like prosciutto and salami and soppressata all over it, so it looked like really.
It looked so creepy.
Really funky. It looked pretty good actually, but
it was equally delicious and terrifying at the same time.
Then I think I shoved like really big olives in the eye sockets to be like eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The one tricky thing about that was transporting it from my house over here.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
I was like, I really need a cop to not pull me over right now, because if they did, I would have some explaining to do. It'd be problematic.
That's pretty funny.
All right, we have a few people saying hello.
And hello back.
So Monique from Massachusetts says hello.
Oh,
So
Monique.
does Esteban from Sweden.
Nice.
We have greetings from India. And Mia from Sweden as well. And Jonathan says he needs that pumpkin chili recipe.
Oh, you know what? I will try my best to get that, like a link to it in the show notes. I know my wife got it online, and I think she knows exactly where she got it because I think she refers to it every time she makes it. So I'll see if we can put that in the show notes. Pumpkin chili recipe. So that, and maybe the Discord. So sign up for the Discord and we'll put it on there.
Esteban from Sweden says he wanted to say thank you so much for having these lives earlier. Now he's able to join pretty much every single one, at least for an hour.
That is awesome.
That's awesome.
And Mia also agrees. The earlier time is great.
Well, that helps us because we're wanting it to be, we don't do this just for fun. We enjoy doing it, but we want to do it for you guys. And if it's better and more convenient of a time, then that is what we need to know.
You should do a poll or something.
Yeah.
So people can vote.
Yeah, it seems like this earlier time slot has been more accessible for some folks. Makes me happy.
Alyssa says hi from Australia.
Hi, Alyssa.
It's gotta be late over there now, right?
Yeah, I think it's, well, let's let Alyssa tell us, but I think it's like almost a 12-hour difference.
Julie says hi from France.
Oh,
She's really
Jean.
enjoying these. Thanks so much. And she loves the earlier time as well.
Nice.
That is amazing.
And one question here, are you using a soft or diffused light in this room to light the still life?
I am, in this instance, I'm using a softer light source, but it's what they would call a light dome. So I kind of made my own version. I took our film light and one of my smaller umbrellas. We always make a joke here because I say umbrella instead of umbrella. So anyway, it's, you know, this old dog can't learn new tricks these days. But it basically has our smaller umbrella on it, and it has a diffuser that basically is just a sheet diffuser. And in some instances, I just use a shower curtain. And I make like a bit of a dome on it. So what's lighting also my face is lighting the subject over here. And then we have different lighting that's lighting our painting so that y'all can see it better.
Alyssa from Australia says it's 5 a.m.
Ooh.
5
But it's a
a.m.
gift to wake up for art like Christmas morning.
Oh,
That's
That's the
awesome. Thank you
best.
so much.
that's the best.
I'm gonna
Another
scoot
viewer
my
says
fabric.
that they shared this with their painting group, and
Oh,
they hope to
cool.
see them join.
That's awesome. Yes, please share it with your painting group. All of us, everybody we can have a good time painting together. Alyssa, in a way, is kind of nice because you can get yourself a cup of coffee or tea if you're a tea drinker, and sit down and sip and watch. Get yourself inspired for the day, hopefully.
maybe even catch a sunrise.
Catch a sunrise. I mean, kind of sitting here wanting to go hang out with you and watch everybody paint. Guess we'll be joining you in Australia soon.
Field trip.
East Oaks field trip. Hey, Erica was there when we went to Italy. She wasn't a part of East Oaks stateside yet. She was in Italy, and we went to do a video of Daniela Stone, and I was teaching a workshop in Florence. And she joined us and was the model. So
I think we should do a trip sometime. That would be a lot of fun.
that would be a blast. Okay, just like yesterday, I'm doing the same thing, lining up for the putt. Kind of getting used to painting the still life. Third day I've painted this still life. All right, now that we got that down, I'm gonna make a little pile of what will be the beginnings of the background color. I'm not gonna make the background quite as chromatic as it is in real life. I'm gonna just neutralize it just a touch. And that's so that it doesn't compete too heavily with the foreground blue, because it's like those two colors are the gray tone in the foreground. Those two colors feel to me like they're trying to try to be the more dominant color, and I don't want them to feel like they're competing with each other. So I'm going to just neutralize the background color a little more than what I see.
One user asks why we show roses and then paint pumpkins on the... And I can actually answer that.
Do it.
Because I painted that rose Alla Prima, and it's the same process same approach that we're doing today. So both the pumpkins and the roses were both painted in one shot, all at once. So I can answer that for you.
Yeah. It was such a lovely painting that we had to have it as our Alla Prima painting on there. And you'll notice that each of the thumbnail days isn't necessarily what we're painting. Each of the thumbnails are just an example of what may happen or something that might be clever. So like, for example, on our Stool of Shame Day, where we're keeping your distance, we have a sergeant painting where she's got her arm extended. And so a lot of the thumbnails are just to be clever or be fun. I will say one of the reasons we don't do this time in the afternoon is because we have leaf blowers that sometimes join us. So I apologize if that's coming in on the background, but it is the it's the world we live in. So
They usually only last a couple of minutes. So.
yeah, exactly. And hopefully our mics are doing a very good job of muting it. I really am excited kind of like painting color today because I haven't painted color in several days. So this is fun. Already running out of color. I need to put more up there. I envy Erica's mixing skills and getting enough color up on her palette ready to go.
Aggressive usage of the palette.
Yes. She knows her way around a palette knife really well, far better than I do.
I also overdo it with how much paint I put on my palette because I hate having to go and get it again out of the tube. I'd rather just have it all on my palette. So.
Yep. Well, then, you know, the day that we're doing the Impasto Syndrome day, it's going to be right up your alley.
I'll put the paint on your palette.
That'll work. That's great.
Are either of you using any medium today?
Right now I'm using the Chelsea Lean Medium just to sort of really thinly sketch in these items. But after that, no, I don't plan on using any. I think with Alla Prima, I tend to try to not use medium, and that's just my personal preference. I think I have a tendency personally to stay too thin for too long, and so by limiting the amount of medium I use, I can help myself build up thicker. Yeah, what about you, Lewis?
I am doing the lean medium, and I would agree with her. You have to really use a lot of paint later if you're using like a lean medium at the beginning. But sometimes I like it because it forces me to use more paint later. But that's definitely one of those things where to each his own. If you haven't tried it, face those fears, try something different. But if you, whatever direction you typically do, the whole month is about getting you used to a different way. So, so I would challenge our audience to whatever you do it differently because neither one way is wrong. What we're doing here is we've been talking a lot about each of us taking a different approach to the exercise. And I love that because it gives you liberty to be creative in finding new ways to do the same exercise that might be challenging for you. So that's why I'm glad that Evie's doing it one way and I'm doing it another so that all of you can see two different ways of doing it. And my encouragement, choose the way that you don't typically use.
Yeah, I'm really excited that I got to paint today because I feel like Alla Prima painting is something that is always kind of intimidating me, to be honest. And usually when we're painting Alla Prima in here, it's with a model more often than not. And there's something like rhythmically that I find about painting a model to be different from painting a still life, where I think I can get in my head a little bit too much when painting a still life just because it's like, okay, it's still in front of me. I should be able to like really try to nail it. So I don't know. I think for a lot of people, it's kind of the other way around where the process of painting a model from life is maybe a little bit more intimidating, but yeah, I'm really excited to be painting.
Nice.
I love how Alla Prima painting forces you to consolidate your decision making. where you have to
yeah.
make fast decisions within a short period of time. And sometimes you discover how your process can actually be more efficient, or that kind of quick decision making is actually beneficial, and you can consolidate your process.
That's great. Yep. I add a little more white to this because I want it slightly brighter. Yet again, it's funny because today we're doing color, right? But there are parts when we're doing color, one of the things to keep in mind is like I was saying earlier, you don't want one color to compete with another. And so some areas I'm still trying to find a harmonious tonality. And so I'm trying to get this color of the cool cloth underneath the pumpkin to be slightly warmer, just like I was trying to make the background slightly cooler. And I'm hoping that kind of helps marry the two colors to be a little bit more related. And I'm also using the same combination. I'm using ultramarine blue and oxide red, and I'm just shifting one more towards the cool, neutral form of it. And then the same with the other, just switching it vice versa. And this is just laying down some paint. You know, I'm not too worried about getting it perfectly right yet. Like always, my blacks are never black at the beginning. They're usually a lighter tone because in these instances, if you start in a neutral value range, like a middle value range, then that gives you more room to make things darker and deeper and lighter. You just need them to be close enough to where if you do mix something lighter into it, it won't muddy it or dirty it up a little bit too much. So that also can apply to darker, but it doesn't bother me too much in the darker because I think often people put too much emphasis on things being too dark. I left my paints out today because I knew I'd be like needing them in this process.
One question here, do you have any tips on competing in the Portrait Society?
Ooh.
That's a big question.
Mm-hmm. Oh man, I'm gonna have to think about that, but I think it's an absolutely fabulous question because I feel like I would if I thought about it long enough. Until then, do either of you have any things that come to mind immediately?
Well, I've never competed before, and I've considered entering my self-portrait, but I think, I think just as a general statement in terms of like submitting art to competitions like that, my philosophy is always like you miss all the shots that you don't take. So if you let yourself be too intimidated or let that self-doubt keep you from doing it, then that's really the only way that you'll definitely not get it.
Yep.
So build up a thick skin and take a shot. You never know, you just might get it.
That's a great answer.
might be more practical advice, but take a quality photo.
Oh, also that, definitely.
Not that I know how to do that. It's just photographing artwork is such a challenge.
I think one thing that people really struggle with when photographing work is the glare, and trying to figure out ways to mitigate glare in an image can be tricky, but it's really worth it to spend the time to make sure that you get it right. Or at least that you're accurately representing all of the hard work you put in.
Yep.
Just one observation from seeing the work from this past year's Portrait Society in person was how complete each painting looked. Like every inch of the painting was cared for and considered, and how thorough of a job each painter did. And so it wasn't just that the portrait was accurate or, you know, some brushwork here and there was good. It was like every layer was considered, and it was really beautiful to see the variety of paintings all at such a high level.
Yeah. And it also, when you see it in person, you're like, oh yeah, the photo just sometimes just doesn't. You got to take the best photo you can to echo what she's saying, because that's all they have to go from. But I'm so glad that they judged the final in person, because photos just don't do it full justice. In any scenario, I have seen that the photos can come up short. But so I'm glad that Portrait Society does it that way. But that makes it even more important to make sure you can take the best photo possible and get it as close and accurate as possible. You know, I think that a couple of things you need it to be identifiably true to yourself. It doesn't necessarily have to be unique in the sense of the subject matter, but you need to have something that identifiably feels uniquely you. I think that's something that they consider. And I think it also goes back to the thing I was saying a few days ago, which is consistency. Making sure that your painting feels consistent throughout the whole painting.
Yeah, Erica, I like the way that you said that, like every square inch is cared for. I think that's a really good way of thinking about it. And I think that that's something that, especially with portraits, a lot of people struggle with, because it's so easy to just zoom in and zone in on the face. But yeah, if for whoever out there is thinking of applying, go for it.
Yeah, you absolutely should apply. You just never know. We get so caught up in our own heads with our work. And sometimes, I don't know about everybody else, but I would think it is probably a majority consensus that if you've been working on something really hard for a really long time, you know, the law of diminishing returns applies to you. And over time, you just probably hate your painting, regardless of how good it is. And so having fresh eyes look at it might help you understand that you're doing a better job than you think you are sometimes. And it can be a morale boost for you.
I also think it's important to share work even if it doesn't win.
Oh,
Absolutely.
Where it's not just, did I win this one thing or not? You know, art is more than that.
Well, and also
to get it in front of people.
At the end of the day, you know, an award is just a reflection of the opinion of several individuals, you know?
It's also a moment in time.
You know, to go back to what you're saying, Evie, one of my favorite things I've heard Shane Neal say is one of my favorite things I heard Shane Neal say is one of the favorite things that he heard Kinsler say. So anyway, it's from Kinsler, where he went to go see him one time, and on his mantle, have I told y'all this story? Y'all heard this? On his mantle, he has a letter and he has an award. And Shane asked him about it one day, and he said, well, this just goes to show like that people are human and different sorry. I didn't realize the
Throwing your trash at me, thank you. I'm kidding.
Anyway, he said he entered into a watercolor competition. I can't remember, it's like down in Florida or something. And when he entered the competition, he got a letter saying, sorry, painting was lovely, but it didn't even make like, not only the finalists, it didn't make like the top 50 or whatever. So he didn't get anything. And the next year, he really thought it was a decent watercolor. The next year, he entered the same watercolor and won the whole thing with the same watercolor, the same competition. And so he has the letter and the award next to each other on the mantle to just go, you know what? It has its place, but you should also never devalue your work just because somebody said it's not good, And so for that reason, that's another reason to apply. You just never know. And I know that a sculptor named Rhoda Scherble had the same thing happen to her. She entered a sculpture competition and didn't get anything. And then the next year, she decided to re-enter the same competition and won. So I just think that's a great testament that people should consider entering it in and entering it in multiple things, because you don't know what's going to be your next break.
People are appreciating your answers.
Oh, good.
I love that. I would love to see a photo of them together on his mantle. I think that's beautiful.
I would not put it past Shane of actually having a photo maybe of that very thing. We should ask him.
Jan says hey from sunny Seaside, Oregon.
Hi, Jan. Thank you for joining.
Sunny Seaside. Sounds great right about now.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? It sounds beautiful. Kind of want to be there.
Tim asks, can you tell us about the brand of brushes you prefer to use? Do you use bristle, synthetic, or others?
Evie, would you like to start with that? I don't want to keep.
Sure. Most of my brushes are rosemary. I do have a couple that I've just accumulated over the years from a couple of different brands. No matter what brand, I always like to get a long handle because I think that allows for a much greater range of motion. And for somebody with chronic tendonitis and wrist problems like me, I think that any way that I can achieve that is a great thing without having to hurt myself. And I like a variety. I use different bristles depending on what it is I'm painting. And I think I tend to fall into a trap of gravitating more towards like really, really soft, smooth brushes. And then sometimes like miss an opportunity to explore a little bit more like impasto brushwork because of that. So lately I've been using more bristle, like gritty bristle brushes in my work. That's been a lot of fun. This one right here is Rosemary Eclipse Filbert. And the Eclipse series is probably my favorite. That and the Evergreen, which I think they're actually the same, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah, so yeah, same thing.
It's kind of a psychological thing that
it's just a different color.
they dyed it a different color, and people really enjoy both of them, but they're truly the same material. They just are dyed different colors. And rosemary, they're very clear about that's what's going on. But if you like Christmas green, or forest green, go for it. You can customize it. They should start dyeing them different colors all in general. That would be fun. Do like little limited editions of different colored brushes.
I mean, I think it's funny. I mean, I don't know why. I actually think I prefer the evergreen and to have that darker color of the bristles themselves.
Oh, yeah, maybe it helps you visualize the paint on your brush better.
I think so. And I guess I've honestly never really given it that much thought, but yeah, I do really like them. But yeah, what about you, Lewis? What are you using?
I am using just a collage of everything. I actually have a few more rosemaries than I typically even do right now. I usually lately I've been forcing myself, speaking of conquering your fears, I have been using less brushes because I have found that I'll use like 27 brushes when I probably could get away with using 3. So I'm compromising and I have like 6 here, but I'll probably only use about 3 or 4 for most of the painting. So I have a hog's hair brush from Silver Brush, and they make a nice filbert version, long-haired hog's hair brush. So I'll put it right here so everyone can see it. This is number 4. And then I have, I do really enjoy Rosemary's Eclipse long brushes. This is for later. They call them a comber. And what I like about them is that the bristles at the end taper down to a very thin razor shape. This is what I use as more of like a finishing brush because I'll need a softer hair later on in the painting process that subtly makes shifts. And this is really great for softening edges or making a really hard, crisp edge, depending on how you use it. And then I have these Michael Klein synthetic brushes, which also, speaking of, I've really enjoyed the Red Dot series. I don't have any right now on here, but these are, I would say, one step down from a Red Dot, but they are fantastic for Alla Prima painting. I love them. I've been using them for a very long time, but they're great for scrubbing it in. They're an affordable price. So if like a damaged one or ruin it, it's not the end of the world. They splay easily or quickly if you're rough with them. But I use the splayed ones just as much as I use other ones to create like interesting mark making. So, so that's mainly what I'm using today. But if I need something else, I'll go into my pile and pick it out. But this should suffice.
I think I actually have a Silver Brush that I don't have it on me at the moment, unfortunately, but I think it's actually technically a watercolor brush. And I love using it to paint hair. Like it gets it's really long, like the bristles are probably like that long. And for doing like little wispies, it's so nice. And I think that's like kind of a good lesson in like, yeah, a lot of the stuff with art supplies is just branding. So, you know, if there's a brush out there that interests you, but it's not made to be used with oil paint, go ahead and try it still, you know? It might just be exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah, a good example of exactly what she's talking about is sable brushes for a long time were marketed as watercolor brushes. But they do just as good a job, if not better job, than many brushes for oil painting. But they're typically not marketed to oil painters because they thought that, you know, oil painters would damage them more quickly, and they're expensive brushes. So they're like, I'll just use a mongoose instead, you know, because, you know, you can beat it up a little bit more. But in reality, a sable is fantastic for doing really soft work if you're that kind of painter. So, yeah, give those ideas a go.
Paul says, sitting across from Julie here in Burgundy, France. Time is great since you're now part of our dinner table, now finishing a glass of wine and watching talented artists at work.
Goodness.
Oh, that's awesome.
Boy, how much fun would it be to be in France with a glass of wine with you guys right now? Well, we're glad we're here for you.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us to your dinner table.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Glad we're hanging out. I feel like going and grabbing a glass of wine and bringing it down, so I feel like I'm joining you.
We'll be over in a jiff.
I don't know how well my painting will turn out if I do that.
Esteban asks, referring to the different painting and sculpture pieces that were entered and rejected and then accepted, before. Esteban asks, why do you think they won the second time if it was not about the painting itself but the contenders?
The judges were different.
Yeah, wait, sorry, can you say that one more time?
Why do you think the painting won the second time around and not the first time? Was it the painting itself, contenders, What do you think it could be?
Well, yet again, there's the contenders absolutely will change and or be different, and so you don't know who's entering in that year. But also, the judges change every year. There might be a few that are the same, but usually it's a board of judges. And so between those two things, you can create a lot of variability. So, and I've been a judge for multiple competitions, portrait competitions, or on a board. I've done solo judging, like jurying, and I've also been on a board before. And in both cases, there are times where, I'm on the fence on a couple of pieces, and it's usually the board member who's doing it with you who might have their suggestion of what they think too, and then they might be on the fence and I have my suggestion. So it's like a mixture of those things can be the difference of someone making it from, say, the top 50 to the top 20. I will say we were almost unanimous on what was our top 4 in both cases that I've been a judge, but it most certainly, it's a very big challenge to be a judge for when you have thousands of entries coming in. And if anybody's wondering, no, I have not judged the Portrait Society International Competition. I make sure that y'all realize I'm not that big of a deal. I did a smaller portrait competitions. Just wanted to head that up so I didn't have to answer that question.
Paul says, please come to Burgundy, lots to paint, and then share great food and wine in an UNESCO heritage community.
I love it. That would be amazing. Next stop, France. We have considered doing East Oaks adventure to Brittany. Still kind of working on those ideas and plans.
I had a professor, an illustration professor in college who was from Brittany.
Really?
And, and he brought back a bunch of sardines for us. Nice. And I had actually never had a sardine before. Oh my gosh, so yummy. I would be very into the idea of going to Brittany. Really anywhere in general. I don't know. I think it's been so long since I've traveled. I'm down to go anywhere.
It's funny. I love traveling, and I haven't been anywhere really aside from a couple of work trips since the pandemic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I was supposed to go to Utah this past spring, and my trip unfortunately got canceled. So
oh, bummer.
Now I have to. Well, now I can use that travel money for a different trip.
There you go.
And I just ordered a new plein air palette, so even better.
Oh, cool. What kind did you order?
I got one of the Yugo
Nice.
palettes. Yeah, I'm really excited about it. Erica and I are gonna go paint some autumn leaves together.
Very
like-
cool.
Perfectly that time of year.
Paul says we have a store here in Burgundy that sells nothing but sardines.
That's
Oh my
amazing.
gosh, I would be in heaven.
We have another question here. Who did you guys train under?
I trained under Jacob Collins at Grand Central Atelier in New York. And before that, I got an art degree at University of Mississippi. And prior to that, I wouldn't call it a study, but I had a role model in our town named Marshall Bolden, who was a portrait painter, very renowned in his day, who's no longer with us. But he lives on between his son, who's also a portrait painter, and me, trying to keep his spirit alive. So he was a dear man that I highly respected.
Well, I've trained under this guy. For which I am just so immensely grateful. Lewis has really taught me so much the last year and a half, and immensely grateful to him. And before that, I did go to art school, but I actually got a degree in ceramics. So my background there is a little bit different. I also actually used to have a career as a textile designer. So I kind of hopped around a little bit with different interdisciplinary media before I was lucky enough to come here. So yeah, immensely grateful.
I will say that I am immensely grateful for the community of artists that we have here in the studio. They all make each one of our lives so rich having them here. So, and every single one of them, y'all deserve to or need to look them up, because they're incredible artists in their own right, and they're really going to be some movers and shakers. I will say, I have met many artists on this journey, and some of them, they come from every single walk of life. So some have been trained, some had self-taught, some are workshop students only and have learned so much from so many different artists. And, those are people like Alex Venezia and Sarah Paige Thompson and Carmen Gordon, all of which they might have had a small sessions at different ateliers, but usually in a workshop format. So, and they're all amazing painters. So it can be done without school training. Just as an encouragement for anyone out there who may not have that access. I think even more importantly, and I've said it before here, but community, I think, is more important than anything as far as your growth is concerned. Because people are, if you're in a good, strong community that cares about you, they want to support you, and they want to share as much information that they've learned along the way. You'll grow so much having a good community of painters around you.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think before I came to East Oaks, I was like starving for that. And I know that that's the position that a lot of artists are in. And I think, you know, especially in these post-COVID times, it can be tricky to start communities and foster that. But it really is hugely impactful. Even online communities like this, you know, it makes a really big difference.
It does. Not having a group can just be so soul-sucking. Even when I was in Oxford and I was painting by myself, and that was pretty brutal, in Oxford, Mississippi, I did have 2 art friends that we would still try to get together and, you know, hire a model, and we do it about once a month. And that was helpful, but I felt like I needed even more than that. So people that want to cheer you on, they want to see you be successful. And quite frankly, sometimes it's hard to find. You know, we live in a world of comparison, and that can be scary. There can be a healthy comparison, and there can be an unhealthy one. And it's not everyone out there wants to cheer you on and to make sure you're finding the right people that are healthy for you.
Yeah, that's actually one of the reasons why I decided to leave the painting department at my school when I was in college. Because I didn't feel like it was, you know, the most nurturing environment. I felt like it was highly, highly competitive and, you know, just not really what I was looking for. And I think that's something that a lot of people there felt as well, and a lot of people in other programs have felt. And I think especially with sort of a resurging interest in kind of like classical realism and Atelier style education, you know, there's also many, many folks that are not able to go that route for whatever reason, and making that knowledge accessible, I think is hugely important for a global art community, for, you know, us certainly. And also, like, I think, I don't know, I always learn things every time I do these streams with you, and I think that that's one of the funnest things for me is like, you know, it allows us to engage with everyone online and get to answer questions from y'all, and also kind of like learn about like ourselves as we go. And I think that that's really beautiful.
Great point. There's been so many times of contemplative self-reflection when people ask questions that you go, you know what, I should probably be thinking deeper about that. And you have now triggered an insight that I want to process, you know. So please ask all those questions, because I might not always have an answer, but it at least gives me something to think about so that I can like assess in my own world, do I have an answer for that? What should that be? You know, part of this community is we're all learning together. We are students of art, and that we should be encouraging each other in that field. So it was really well said, Evie. Beautiful.
I think artists are kind of just like perma students. I don't know. We never really can stop learning.
That's right.
We have another question here. Any tips on how to create a moody or atmospheric effect in a painting? For example, Jeremy Lipking, Alex Venezia, etc.
Yeah. Or even an Erica Arcudi, because she did a nice atmospheric painting yesterday.
Well, of course.
So, hey, in fact, how about you answer that question, Erica? You're good at making an atmospheric painting.
So when I think about mood and atmosphere, I immediately think about values. And because your value relationships will determine the effect. And so something misty will have a very, misty and mysterious will have a very condensed value relationship, versus something dramatic might have a wider range of values. And so I like to do value studies when I'm determining a composition, similar to the poster studies you guys did at the beginning, where I'll do a lot of tiny little ones just to see if it's capturing the vibe, for lack of better words, of the emotion I'm trying to create. So, if I need to compress something or maybe add something else, I'll try to try it out in the values first. And I suggest for the paintings that you think are really interesting, do value studies, like little value studies. They don't have to be bigger than 5x7, it can be smaller than that. Little value studies of your favorite paintings to discover what is the abstract bones beneath that painting, like what's making you feel a certain way. And so I think it's very helpful to do things like that. And then you'll find what your taste is. I think values first and then determine color. Color obviously has a psychological effect too, but as we said yesterday, value does all the work and color takes all the credit. So, first unlocking what value relationships are happening in the painting and then figuring out what the color is. That's what I would suggest. I think too, this is something Daniela Astone would talk about a lot about the abstract underneath the realism, and how certain abstract lines, and maybe it's, think of a very serene painting, a very calm painting. You might find a lot of straighter lines, maybe more horizontal, maybe, calmer, versus something very dramatic. You might have a lot of angles and movement. And so looking at lines and shapes, colors, values, all of those abstract words in that language, looking at what they mean in your paintings. And so doing all of these studies helps you figure out where you're going from that point of view. So if you want something calm and stable, you might not have the horizon line at a tilt, you know what I mean? Or
That's great.
Or I'm thinking of who was it? Rubens, The Deposition. And you have this dramatic triangle of Christ coming down from the cross, and it's very dramatic, versus something I'm thinking of. There's a landscape painting from Giorgio Belloni, and it's mostly all one value, and the lines are very calm. There's not you have the horizon line of a seascape and some clouds, but otherwise it's very calm and relaxing. And so, it's very, you can see the feeling that you're getting from two different pieces. And if you do studies, then you can kind of unlock why. That's how I would answer the question.
That's great.
Feel free to.
That was fantastic. I don't need to add anything to that. That was awesome. Daniela would be so proud. And that's one of the people that Erica studied under heavily, being a Florence Academy artist.
Yes, she, when I was a student, she directed the second year, and she's definitely one of my role models.
Every time we talk about Danielle, I'm just like, oh, I want to meet her.
She's so cool.
Maybe one day. East Oaks has to go back to Italy.
Mm-hmm. We do.
I see here in the comments that Paul's wife studied at Florence Academy of Art in Italy and Grand Central.
Oh, nice.
Oh, wow. Two fabulous places to study. You got the whole spectrum.
He's a non-painting spouse. He had a great time when Julie studied at Florence Academy of Art in Italy and Grand Central. He met amazing artists and still keeps in contact.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's really great.
Non-painting spouse. I love that.
Hey, you know,
We've both got those.
we do.
Well, I've almost got one of those.
You most certainly have the most supportive partner ever. He's such a great guy.
Fun fact, folks, I am getting married a year from now. Today, exactly.
Woo! Today's the year countdown.
Whew. Lots to do.
And I'm not going to say what you think I might.
No! Oh. We made it so long.
Yes, we made it so long.
Every time.
How dare I do such a thing? And everybody else is probably like, huh? So,
The song's already stuck in my head.
yep. So, almost if anyone has been joining us for any duration of live streams, you might know that we keep getting the earworm. It's the final countdown song stuck in our head. So,
I can't even remember how that started.
I want to say it was almost a year ago when we did that the bread still life.
Oh,
and
I think you're right.
I think one of us said it, and then like that became the earworm, and then it just kept happening over and over again.
Oh my gosh. God, that was about a year ago now.
Isn't that something?
That's wild.
Time flies. Yeah.
Oh, yep.
Mia says, congratulations on your upcoming wedding.
Oh, thank you so much.
I'm so excited for you, Evie.
Me too. Thank you.
We have a comment here that I like. Art is important. Don't forget people.
I love that. Very,
That is
very
so
true.
good. Yeah, getting those priorities straight. I like it. You know, I aspire to kind of put art in the right priority in my head, which is, I think it's easy when you do this all day long and that it's your career and that you're like, this thing is the most important thing on the planet. And it is important, you know, in your hierarchy of priorities of your life, if that is what you've chosen to do as your life career. But you can easily lose sight of what is far more important, which is your relationships and nurturing those above all versus having art as the priority or whatever it might be. You know, there's many things that you can prioritize in your life that are not healthy for you because you might be compromising the people that love you, care for you, and actually can be your support. And so I love to take it seriously enough to be able to like drive me forward to do things like these videos for everyone and to like push my career, the career of East Oak Studio forward. But at the end of the day, the whole reason I work hard is to be able to give more time to family and friends. And if there's a time where that's being compromised, I need to reassess that why I'm doing what I'm doing, you know, and having that why. So, for what
Balance
that's
is
worth.
key.
Yes, balance is key.
This is a related question, Louis, for you. How long did it take you to understand yourself as an artist?
Ooh. You know, I would put that in a very similar category to someone saying, how long did it take for you to become fluent in a language? And anyone who's taken a language would know that fluency is sort of this like mirage. It's more about like levels of proficiency is a better way of putting it. And so I think there's the same thing as there's levels of realization as an artist, you know, of like how important it is to you. So just to reiterate, I want to make sure I understand the question. Say the question one more time.
How long did it take you to understand yourself as an artist?
Okay. So I would say that there's parts of me that don't understand myself as an artist yet. But I would say that there's more that does than doesn't. So
it's an ongoing process.
It is an absolute ongoing process. We're all in a journey of enjoying and learning and you know, doing this practice. And so I understand myself as being a learner and to being further along than some people. And so if I'm further along than some people, then I have a responsibility to share where I am and what I know with people who might not be quite there yet. Because I don't know everything, but I feel like I still have value to give because there's people that aren't quite where I am yet. And that's almost the case for everyone, you know? You can always find someone that you can share with because there's always somebody that's a little bit earlier in the journey than you are. I think I've used this analogy. I use it a lot here, so might get the girls rolling their eyes. But I have, there's an analogy from an old movie called Pistol about a guy named Pistol Pete Maravich, and his dad was a basketball player. And it's one of my favorite lines because he's teaching a high school basketball team, and he gets the high school players to come in a huddle, and he looks at him and he says, okay, this circle, and he draws a circle on a basketball, and he shows it to him, and the circle is the size of maybe like a silver dollar. And he says, this is everything I've learned about basketball in my entire life. And the basketball represents everything there is to know about basketball, and anything outside that circle is everything yet to be discovered about basketball. Then he puts a little dot on it, and he shows it to him, and he goes, this is you. And I love that because there's more than lifetimes can tell that we can learn in the art world. And more of the realization I've had is how much you don't know when you learn more. They have I wonder what that effect is called. They have a name for that effect, where the more you start knowing, the more the realization of what you don't know increases. Which is great because I think it allows for people to stay humble.
You'll never be bored.
Yeah, absolutely, we'll never be bored. And if you feel like you've stopped learning and you've learned everything, then you have just chosen not to learn anything more, whether it be subconscious or consciously.
I think that's true with so much of life.
Yeah.
Also, like outside of art, it's just like if you think you know everything about something, chances are it's actually probably not the case. I think there's a spirit of discovery that's really important to keep, and that's so much more important than a spirit of knowing or of knowledge or of accomplishment almost.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't really know if that makes sense, but yeah, I totally agree with that, Louis.
I think this connects well to our next question. What is the philosophy of classical realism? Or what is the objective to express? Here's a big one.
Well, that's a big one. Well,
You want to take that one?
I will say, I'm going to go back to that basketball analogy, that the philosophy of realism has yet to be fully discovered. But I can give you where I am in my journey of understanding. So, at the end of the day, the philosophy, I love how David Gluck puts it. You know, he has a blog called Painting Stuff to Look Like Stuff. And to a degree, my philosophy in just painting in general is very similar to the vision statement of East Oaks, which is restoring hope through beauty. And I find the world and the natural world to be a very beautiful place, and I'm very inspired by it. And I want to represent that in a way that is poetic in how I represent the world that I see, and try to capture. Part of the problem is we have any art medium, whether it be poetry, film, dance, all we're doing is we're taking truths and we're compressing them into a field of expression. And in that field of expression, trying to curate it in such a way that simplifies it but by simplifying it, expands the understanding of something truthful. And the more accurate you can get with that, the more beautiful the thing is to people. Now, that's not to say that everyone perceives the same way. Some people might find a work of modern art to be simply as beautiful as, say, a beautiful still life. And so each one of us has a sense of observational truth in our heads of how we receive. And I tell people, for me, it's like I imagine people have different wavelengths that they receive and can understand. So think of yourself, and oddly, this is just an exercise, a metaphorical exercise, but think of yourself as a radio, and there are all these radio waves of truth. This is a very Plato way of thinking, by the way. This comes back from a Platonic format. But if there are all these different emissions or radiations of truth that are coming out, and some of us are able to receive them, some different wavelengths of that truth. And in those wavelengths of that truth, we're able to recognize and go, oh, that's beautiful and that's truthful. And somebody else might have a whole different radio wavelength that they receive of a different part of truth, you know? And so they might see it in a totally different light of what they think is beautiful. And in that light, neither one are wrong. They're just seeing a certain sliver of this like vastness of different things that are beautiful because they're truthful. So what I'm doing is not trying to represent all the truth in the world. I'm just saying this is what I perceive as beautiful and truthful, and I'm hoping that people that have a similar wavelength of receiving receive it as beautiful as I see it, and trying to transfer that language. So that's what realism is for me, and what I'm trying to do, express through it, is in a poetic way, trying to get to a deeper truth.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny paradox almost, where I feel like contemporary realists are inherently empirical, but also the nature of art is not always objective. So I find that there's kind of a funny intersection between making a statement of this is the truth versus this is my truth. And I think in that way, it becomes a really beautiful biographical process of being able to say, you know, this is the world as I experience it here. Let me try to show you. And somebody could either find it beautiful or think nothing of it,
Yep.
you know? You could say, hey, this is absolutely gorgeous. Like, look at the way the light's falling on this, yada, yada. Or you could just be like, well, it's a pumpkin.
Mm-hmm.
What's up with the pumpkin? You know, I mean, I think at the same time, I think not all art has to have like really intense metaphorical meaning in order to be good. I think the thing that defines good contemporary realism isn't necessarily that it's perceived as a good painting, but it's rather the experience of it. How does something affect you? How profoundly does something move you?
Yeah, I think that those are both in alignment.
We have a more grounded question now about process. When you are painting Alla Prima and making color choices more rapidly than working on a studio painting, are there some frequent questions you are asking yourself during the process to nail the color? I can repeat the question if you want.
Are there certain things in reviewing your color? Yeah, could you repeat it?
So when you are painting Alla Prima and making color choices more rapidly than working on a studio painting,
Mm-hmm.
are there some frequent questions you're asking yourself during the process in order to nail the color?
Yeah.
When you,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
have less time to
Yep.
gradually discover it, like how do you find it more quickly?
Is the temperature right? Is the value right? Am I compressing enough? Those are
Mhm.
probably the three big ones.
Yeah, yeah.
And sometimes the answer to that question is no, and you have to adjust and change things around.
Yes, I totally agree with everything that Evie said. I also think that in addition to that, just like everything, it's about relationships. And so I'm thinking about what color relationship I'm putting here and how it relates to another color, because nailing the color is more about nailing the relationship between two objects and how they are being represented together, using sort of the illusions of color to represent the nature. So that being said, but I would say that's not much different than how I paint normally. I just have to think about it more quickly and make a faster decision on it. The other thing I would say that is not about the color is that, you know, or I know another thing I do that's different from how I indirect paint. Another thing I do that's different than indirect painting is I'll put different swatches of color sometimes down to represent different things so that I can better relate the color. So I can say, here's my lightest light, here's my most chromatic thing I want in the painting, here is the darkest dark, here is my largest color, here is my smallest color, and then see if I can find a way to sync them.
I did that yesterday. I took notes basically, where I mixed colors and I put dots with my palette knife to represent where my lightest light, my background, my two different pumpkins, like making sure I liked the relationship before committing. So taking those notes really quick so you can see how big picture, how things are relating before then committing to covering the canvas. And you can figure out more quickly how to, if you need to adjust a relationship earlier than if you then paint it, then have to like repaint it and stuff like that. So taking notes.
That's good.
I'm reminded of a list of priorities that when I was a student at Florence Academy was basically given to us, which was like to ask yourself these series of questions in this order. Is it the right shape, in the right place, in the right value, then in the right temperature, and then in the right color? So color was last on that list. And with the idea that you do have some leeway with what the right color is. It's not something that's necessarily so fixed. It's something, like Lewis said, is, it's always in a relationship to something else. And so, the rest of that list of priorities is more important in order to get the painting to work, and then color fits in after that. And it's something that you can more quickly figure out the color if the rest of those relationships are working earlier. It's easier to judge what the shift in color should be once you tweak, or once you have the rest of that checklist done. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. That's a really good organized system. I love that.
Erica, you're always so succinct. I love it. I wish my brain worked that way.
Thank you.
And that's why I love my community here. See how encouraging everybody is? Love it. This is how the girls are every day. Just makes me so happy.
Stephanie says, heard James Taylor say once that his original goal was to write songs that were pretty. Pretty, of course, is one of those subjective status changing for everyone, but truthful strikes me as a better goal.
Fun fact, James Taylor actually got expelled from my high school.
That's awesome. I don't know about y'all, but I love James Taylor's voice. He's awesome. I haven't listened to him in a while.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Me too. But yeah, I do like his voice.
I used to listen to him all the time when I painted, but it's been a while. It's been a minute since I've done that.
Well, I can remedy that pretty easily.
Hmm.
Do you have a favorite song?
The only one that right now that as soon as I think it, James Taylor, I think of the Gone. I don't even know the title because I'm bad with titles, but the one where he's like, "In my mind, I've gone to Carolina."
On my mind, in my mind.
On my mind, yeah. On my mind, in my mind.
Gone to
Carolina.
Yep.
Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, I think I'm going to listen to him later now.
I've always loved Copper Line. It's a song he wrote referring actually to, I believe it's a creek. It's actually right next to a house where one of my friends grew up. We used to go down and play in that creek all the time. It's really beautiful. I think sometimes when you see something so beautiful, you could just be like, yeah, I understand why somebody felt like they needed to write a song about this.
Yeah.
Or conversely, why somebody needed to paint this.
Yep.
We have a camera question. How far do you put the camera to your canvas? And, sorry, let me give you some background. From Edmonton, Canada, question about filming. Recently started video recording my painting progress. I wonder how you position your camera so you get less distortion and more focus. And how far do you put the camera from your canvas? What's your f-stop? I wonder if East Oaks has a video on this topic or any resources are appreciated.
Yeah. That is something I always am tweaking, just so you're aware that there's definitely I wouldn't say I have it perfectly figured out, but what we try to do is try to make the best angles. First thing I do is before I'm thinking about how close or far away something is the lighting right so that you can see it? Because we're working with a wet medium, it's easy for glare to come into play. And due to that, I would say make sure to pay attention to that part of it. That being said, the camera angles are all different lenses. So I address it according to the lens that I have on it. Like for example, I have a 100 millimeter lens on this one. And then, this is a big deep dive, just to let you know, because there's so many things that you got to take into consideration as you get deeper and deeper into this world. You can do it simply, but it can get complicated. So because it depends on if you have a full frame camera or a cropped frame camera, and it depends on what your shutter speed is and all of those things, depending on how much light you should put in. So the f-stop is going to be different for you because you might not be using the same kind of light source, and all those things. But you can change all of those things in order for it to work for you. I would say try to keep your camera at a 400 ISO and start it at 24 frames per second. That's going to help give you more light coming in. I do not have a video on this kind of stuff. I would if I was more of a video-oriented company. But since we're trying to stay within niche, I haven't made one yet on the idea of artists trying to film themselves. However, we are going to work on doing one for photography, so taking photos of your work, which they share similar principles. They're a little different, but that's the start of it. And so you can use any camera angle lens. It's really about you need to bring your camera closer or farther away. And the larger the diameter of the glass is on the front of your lens will allow more light to come in to your camera. So take that into consideration too, because you might need just a stronger light source sometimes to make it all work. I prefer the camera themselves to be a more telephoto lens for the purpose of keeping the camera far enough away for me to step back. But you don't need it to be a really far telephoto lens. But it does help with that. And perspective problems, there are some ways to correct it, but you need special things like OBS and other perspective tools. If you're filming, you can correct the perspective in whatever editing software you want to use. They all have perspective correction. You have to correct it yourself. It won't automatically do it like it does on Photoshop, but they do have things like that. So, and the good thing is that there's this beautiful thing called YouTube that we are on that has every resource you would ever need. You just have to kind of dig for it a little bit. So most of the stuff I've learned from YouTube. So dig deep there. But we will do a one on how to take photos of your work. And that's going to be sometime in the too far future. Probably January or February, I might put that together.
I will be watching that.
We are going to make everybody's masters here of photographing your work. I've got to get the right equipment too to do it the right way, but I'm going to show a cheaper way of doing something, and then I'm going to show a more expensive way if you're a deeper professional, that you can write off some of the equipment.
Paul says, so was James Taylor a plein air songwriter connecting to the creek song, Evie.
Oh, there you go. I love that.
That makes me think of Nora Jones' song, If I Was a Painter. If I was a painter.
Oh man, I haven't listened to her in a long time either.
I would.
I'm just going to be singing
paint
along to
my
all this
reverie.
in my car on the way home
Yep.
tonight. I
That
love Nora
album
Jones.
came out when I was in Italy. And I had my little Sony CD player Walkman back in the day. And I had these like really cheap speakers that I would use to put it on and go to sleep to. So, because it was so easy to go to sleep to her voice.
We have another question here. How do you pick a color palette for a particular work? Which factors are considered so harmony can be established, and how it changes from painting to painting?
Ooh. You know, this is a good question in the sense that you don't have to necessarily have the objects dictate your color harmony. You can, but I would feel like that's pretty advanced. You can just use a limited palette that chooses the color harmony for you, and you can almost make any color of the spectrum work within that harmonious palette. You know, and of course, probably the most famous is being the Apelles or Zorn palette, depending on who you talk to, but the Zorn, you know, most people know it as the Zorn palette. So that's kind of what I would say to that. That's the quick answer. The long answer is you need to practice looking at all the different forms of color harmony, because there's tertiary color harmonies, there is tetracolor harmonies, there's complementary color harmonies. There's like 10 different ones. Oh, I know a good thing is there's an Instagram page called, is it called Art Palettes? I shared it with one of you recently. I can't remember who it was. And it basically has a painting, and then underneath the painting it shows the color palette in about 7 colors of what are sort of like the primary colors they used for that painting. It's really great. And they have one for like called the cinema palette, you know, where they take different shots to show you what they might have used for color coding. And it's a lot of fun. So I would check that out. I need to look up what it was called for everybody. All right, we're going to go over to our more colorful pumpkin.
Thank you, and really appreciate the info. We have another one saying, looking forward to the photographing your artwork session. And then
Nice.
we have a couple questions here. Artist grade oil paints are quite expensive. Which colors do you think are sufficient for one to buy to paint almost anything?
If you want the widest range that doesn't take into consideration color harmonies, but you would have to create your own, the widest range of primary colors you can mix is cobalt turquoise, lemon yellow, and magenta, and then white and black. If you want to have the opportunity to create the most color and the most spectrum and only get 4 or 5 colors, you know, being black and white and then the 3 primaries. That could give you the largest range. But you will also realize that you'll be mixing a heck of a lot all the time to try to get accurate colors that you need. So the other thing you could do is a Zorn palette or something like it that allows you to get closer to some of the mixing colors, and then you would be just pushing color harmonies, which the cheapest version of that would probably be CAD Red. Is it raw sienna, or is it, what's the yellow that is on the Zorn
Yellow
palette?
ochre, I think.
Yellow ochre, yeah, yellow ochre. And black and white, and you just get ivory black as your blue. And that's a really cheap one too. And I actually have a video on that, on affordable colors that you can watch. Basically, I'm saying the same thing, just without a beard.
A lot of your earth pigments will be less expensive,
Mm-hmm.
but you can get a lot out of them. We have another question here. Can you share your insights on color temperature and how warm and cool aspects work in a painting? Is it different in flowers as opposed to painting flesh? I think yesterday's video covers some of that content too.
Mm-hmm.
Since yesterday we were working in a grisaille palette, so things were quite neutral, but we were still playing with temperature, creating, using warm and cool to have things come forward or recede just based off of their temperature. And I mean, I can share some of
You
my
got it, girl. You go for
insight
it.
on for flowers. So let me think. So I absolutely consider warm and cool when I paint flowers. I just think of it as a more like in a more trying to find the right word, complex way, where when it comes to flowers, only because, for example, earlier when I'm painting, if I were painting a still life, for example, I might use temperature to show, something was receding, so I'll make it a little bit cooler. For example, the background, I might not have a really, really warm background if I want something to be pushed back in space in relationship to something else that I want to come forward. So that doesn't mean you need to make the object orange and the background blue. It's just in certain areas, if you want to push it back, you can make it cooler, more neutral, and conversely, if you want to bring something forward, you can make it a little bit warmer. When painting flowers, I still think about that. I think about what things are coming forward, what things are receding. But I'm also thinking about how light is passing through something. For example, if I have light passing through a leaf or light passing through a petal, it'll create something that seems warmer and more chromatic. And so versus something that's starting to turn into the background, or for example, if I have a petal that's where the plane is starting to turn towards the leaves, then it'll be cooler, maybe more green in an area, typically in my midtones. And so I'm thinking of the same concepts that I would in a portrait, for example, like if light is passing through and creating subsurface scattering, is that the right term, Lewis?
Mm-hmm.
And so then you'll have warmth and higher chroma in that section versus something where it's turning away, like, often in a kind of classic studio setup, you might have an area on the cheek that's starting to turn away into the background. That might be cooler in relationship to like a warm area around the nose. And so again, it's always about creating relationships and creating a sense of space and depth and variety and managing all of that color. So for example, you're not having something super warm and rich in an area that you want to have tucked away. So it's the same idea for both portraits and flowers. It's almost just like different, I don't think complex is the right word I said earlier. I think it's just like applying it in different situations. So I don't think it's more or less complex. I think it's just different.
Yeah. That's great, Erica.
Trying to come up with something on the fly. I'll say something with flowers. I think something that can be challenging with flowers is that you're often dealing with an object whose local color is either really bright, like for example, I'm thinking of if I'm painting a rose and it's like fuchsia, you know, creating temperature relationships in something that's so chromatic, or something where even the color is shifting, like maybe there are green areas turning into pink areas, and how you're creating temperature shifts in something that has such variety in color, how you can manage all of that. So that can be kind of tricky. But I think it's always about selection and your priorities, and so communicating what is essential. So what do I really need to include in order for the light effect to work? That's usually my priority, and so that will help me make my decisions whether to include certain temperature or color shifts. And then practically, if you squint and you still see it, then it's probably important. So that's another way of determining.
Oh, yeah. Way to go, Erica. That's good stuff. Keep on going.
I think one of the reasons I love painting is that there's just so much to untangle and so much to learn, and so I just find it all fascinating.
It is.
And I love deconstructing it and putting it back together.
That rabbit hole goes deep.
One user asks, what themes do you use? And I would love to clarify, or if you could clarify what exactly you mean, whether you are talking about subject matter or something relating to color harmony. So, Faye, if you can elaborate on your question, then we can answer it for you.
Starting to think about what themes she might be talking about. This pumpkin is so fun. He's like, it got subtle color and then like punches of dark color in certain spots. Makes for a really interesting range of things going on here.
We have another question. How do artists take a painting from this level to a hyper-realistic level? What is it that they actually do?
Oh, well, if you're talking about hyperrealism, they window shade a lot more. So you would be working and trying to finish as you go a lot more than you would in an Alla Prima painting. So they wouldn't even start like this most often, from what I have observed. So they typically will have like, it's funny, they'll have like just a little paper plate and they'll have like primary colors on it and they'll just keep mixing and they'll just start work in a very small area and they'll keep shifting over until they feel like it welds to the area that they did before and continues to push towards the form all the way around it. So it's a very different process than what this is. But you can make this one much more rendered over time. But what I would say is that what I would do today differently is at the end of the day, I might scrape the whole thing to get rid of a lot of the impasto because hyperrealism doesn't use paint mark making as part of its poetry. So it's more about just trying to make the thing have as much high rendered detail as possible. So in that sense, the approach would be completely different. This is more about making decisions where a lot is said in a little bit of mark making. And so mark making plays a role in the poetry of the piece. And that would be one of the main differences. Hopefully I hope that didn't disappoint you as an answer, but that's, I'm pretty sure that's my decision, my answer regardless. I don't think it would change.
How would you take this painting into a more rendered version? Not necessarily hyper-realistic, but where you're adding more detail.
Ooh, good question. I mean, if that's the question, then I would say I would end up painting more accurately with my value range now. And then the next couple of layers really refining. And largely what we're going to be doing on day 3, the 3 days of layered painting at the end of the month, where we're taking all of the different things that we've learned and we're compiling them together into those 3 days. That's what I'll be doing. I'll be tightening the screws and rendering heavier. And so it'll be more about edge work, making sure the form makes complete sense throughout the whole painting. I would spend more time on each area. I would spend more time on the drawing because the foundation of that drawing is going to be more important, especially on the last 3 days because we'll be doing a portrait. So I would end up working a lot on edge work and making sure there's a good balance in edge work and subforms, all the tiny little forms that exist. I'll end up like working on the ones that matter to me more than any of the other ones, a little bit more. Just keep painting it. That's all I'll do is just keep painting it.
Just made me think of Dory from Finding Nemo.
Just
keep painting. Just keep painting.
Good old Dory, I love her. Love her character. This is a fun thing when I'm working on details like this, like these little creases. I'll make like a wide brush stroke, and it's a very thin mark, but I'll make a wide one and then go in with the lighter values to sharpen it up.
What do you consider to be your favorite stage of the painting?
Ooh. I consider, for me, it's honestly the details end of a painting. Like putting, like compress or using taking advantage of the value range and keep finding subtlety within each value range that I've already put down, and trying to like render out the parts that are the focal points of the painting a little bit more. All of that stuff really intrigues me. I enjoy that.
What about you, Evie?
I think maybe like the end of the middle of a painting. I think like the very end of a painting, I always have a tendency to question myself and asking, is this done? Am I gonna finesse this too much? I think I struggle with like finding out like when is the painting telling me it's done. But I think I most enjoy kind of like the end of the middle part of a painting where, you know, you're locked in, you've got enough detail to really like know, okay, this is the direction I'm going in. And you just have a lot of room to play around with color, rather than having to focus as heavily on values as you do in the beginning. But I also work indirectly, so that, of course, that process looks different than doing Alla Prima. But yeah, I don't know. I think probably the hardest part, or the part that I enjoy the least, is like, honestly, like the very beginning. Yeah, I don't know. Do you have a part that you enjoy the least?
Oh yeah, it's the middle.
The middle? Ooh.
Yeah, the slog. That time where you're like, you know, I don't even love this painting anymore. And you're like trying to get through some of the frustrations. It's like the beginning of a painting. I feel like often we're so excited about painting it because the possibilities are endless. The world is our oyster in our heads, right? And then like we start making decisions and we start limiting the chances of like making something incredible, but we don't want to change the choices that we've made because we're scared, and that's part of that, facing the fears. And so for those reasons, I think that oftentimes people will, or at least I do in these instances, will find that the middle is really challenging because that's where like the largest amount of problem solving comes into play, and you have to really work your brain, but you're frustrated with your painting sometimes, and you know that the only way out is through, and so you're trying to get there. But as long as you know that and you keep telling yourself, trust your training, you know, you'll get there. And that's That's the part that I love, is on that other end when you've figured that out, and then all you have to do is like tighten screws, because I really enjoy that part of it, just kind of cleaning things up.
I think in a weird way, I kind of love the part where you hate it. Because I think that that's the part where you realize how much this matters to you.
Oh.
And like if the stakes are high and you're getting flustered and frustrated, it's because it matters and because you care. If you didn't care, you wouldn't really feel that way about it. You wouldn't feel any kind of way about it. So I feel like in that sense, I always feel like any frustration that I have at that part in the middle, it's always at least productive. And I'm gonna try to remind myself that I just said that next time I get frustrated, because it does happen. But
that makes me happy to know, because we both have shared our frustrations in the middle of paintings, and I'm gonna go, well, at least you're excited. You're doing your favorite part.
Yeah.
That's where you're gonna be like, shut up, Liz. Come in, I'm gonna look over, you're gonna be frustrated and be like, I'm so excited for you. You're getting to do your favorite thing today.
Well, I think the tension is good. I don't know.
Oh yeah, tension's great. We only grow in our tension, Yeah.
Exactly.
What's the guy, something Green, right? That wrote the book Mastery?
Oh, Alex showed me that.
David Green? Dan Green?
I don't know why
Something
I wanted
Green.
to say Robert. Yeah.
Anyway, he has a part in there. He says that the place that you learn the most is at the point of frustration. That's where your brain has to like create new avenues and new ways, and your brain doesn't want to do that because it takes energy and it's hard and takes time. And yet that is where we actually grow. So I got to stop working on that little spot, because I'm kind of getting into that final detail stage, and I've got so much more of this painting to do.
Yeah, I think that's something that I know I get really anxious about with Alla Prima painting, is just time management, because that's so much about what it's about. And having the instinct to be able to say, like, okay, I've laid down this degree of information, I've got to move on, doesn't always come naturally. And I think that that's a fun skill to try to hone in on.
Yeah, totally.
If you could angle your back slightly.
Oh, sorry.
Only so that it doesn't block the camera. Occasionally, you don't have to do it all.
Like,
I can pull this over too. Speaking of camera angles, let's see if that helps.
Can you lower it like a 1/4 inch?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Perfect. That should be better.
sorry, y'all.
Oh, no.
Hopefully that camera angle will be better. I think people are loving the content. They just want to see what you're doing.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, okay.
You
Not
okay?
gonna spill stuff all over the place.
It's a good goal. Good goal.
And hopefully I'm not gonna jinx myself either. An art studio is a tumultuous place for
Yes.
an accident-prone person like myself.
It's funny because I feel like, at least me, I can speak for myself as an artist, easy to be accident prone. So everything is in constant jeopardy of me flailing my arms around.
When talking about favorite stages of the painting, I have to say I love the block-in.
Oh,
I love a block-in. I love the beginning layers where things are, when they're coming forward from the background, and like the sculptural effect is starting to happen, and depth is starting to come forward, and like light effect is starting to reveal itself. I just think that's so cool that paint could do that. So I find it very exciting.
That's cool.
That stage.
I wish I could feel that way. I'll have to try to take a page out of your book, Erica, because that's always the part that like has me holding my breath.
I think there's certainly the pressure of that stage needing to be accurate, but I think that over time that pressure has relaxed because I can get excited about once I realized like the shadows, like I remember Ramiro saying this in third year, like the point of the shadow is to reveal the light, and it's like I had heard that before, but it just clicked when he said it, and then once I was thinking of it like that, then it just made it so cool to put in shadow shape, because I'm like, oh, the light is coming forward, and this is amazing.
Isn't it great when you could have been told something 1,000 times, but your mind is cultivated to a point of receiving it, and it all of a sudden like makes sense,
Just
and it's
clicked.
like
Yeah.
You know, I tell
the best
people a lot,
feeling.
and it's such a good feeling. That's what I tell people in our workshops. It's the first thing I tell them is, okay, you're not going to come out painting like Rembrandt, so let's go ahead and like get that that expectation out the window.
But you might have some aha moments.
Right, exactly. And I tell them exactly that. I'm going to give a lot of information. Don't try to even receive all of it. Just take 2 or 3 moments that were eureka moments when you were in the class. And if you have a eureka moment, then it was worth your time. So many people come in with high expectations and get very disappointed when they take a workshop thinking that they're going to learn, or they're going to grow so quickly. They learn a lot. They don't feel like they grow, but if they just take a hold of that one thing, then that they should consider their time there a success.
I mean, there's so many critiques that I remember from my first year at Florence Academy that I think about now, years later, that finally processed.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's what that person meant. Like, oh, that's how I can think about this and in a more detailed way or more specific way. I finally know what this word means.
That's awesome, Erica.
There are things like that just sometimes it just takes time for it to meld, and then it comes out later.
That's great. I think the sad thing about this setup is I'm having so much fun painting this little guy, this little pumpkin, that I'm like scared I'm not going to get through the rest of it. So I got to like start powering through a little bit. Also,
about 55 minutes left.
Okay, that's good to know, actually.
Yeah, I've neglected my orange pumpkin.
Yep, here we go.
Trying to get everything in. It's always a battle against time.
Louis, for such a detailed object with a lot of information, how are you choosing to, what information are you putting in, and how are you making that decision?
Well, I most certainly have come to grips with that I'm not going to be able to get every perfect little shape perfectly because, for example, like the orange shapes and how they're organically put in, I'm doing an impersonation of where those orange shapes are.
A representation.
A representation.
Yeah. There you
Yeah,
go.
exactly. And so, so that's the first thing that I'm keeping in mind when I'm doing this. Secondly, is the overall understanding of the form and how the light is wrapping around the form, and trying to get an abbreviated version of the warm-cool relationships of the colors. And so that's like, for example, what I'm doing over here. I'm grouping all these, even though they're all kind of looped together. I'm kind of grouping these together to get an overall understanding of what the form is doing as it's turning away from the light. And then I'm going to try to get more accurate with it, and then go in and start making the sort of the wavy bits of the pumpkin. What do they call it? I think one of the people said yesterday what they call the turns on a pumpkin. They have a name. Anyway, so I'm just working on trying to get those turns understood after I get the larger form put in. So that's what I'm thinking about. That's a good question, because it's one of those things I'm thinking, but I'm not thinking out loud like I typically am on the matter. But trying to give them some understanding. It's funny because part of painting for me is not being distracted by the other things I see that need to get done. I don't know if y'all are like this, but for me, I see like 27 things that need to be changed or fixed or done. And it's easy for me to get shiny object syndrome and want to like just jump around. And I'm trying to refrain myself from doing just that. Now I have that song, Jump Around, in my head. Today is this day of earworms.
We have another question. May I ask if it's necessary to include a certificate of authenticity when we sell a commission or any artwork?
For selling a commission specifically?
Or any artwork? Like, do you need to include a certificate of authenticity?
Well, if it makes you feel better, if for example, if you should be, if it makes you feel better, I don't. And that is something that I actually would like to do, because I feel like it makes it feel more professional. But I don't think that it's legally necessary, if that's what you're asking. As long as you have some sort of documentation and your signature is on it for you, then I think that it should be fine. What are your thoughts, ladies?
I'm trying to think. I don't know that I've ever included one either. But I have included like handwritten notes to the collector and, you know, things like that. And historically, people have always really appreciated that little extra personal touch. But yeah, I've never really found it necessary. So I don't know. It's an interesting question.
It is an interesting question.
I include them when I sell my work. And I spoke with a gallerist, and he said that whoever sells the work gives the certificate of authenticity. So, for example, if a gallery sells it, then they'll be the one that deals with that. And if it's you who sell it, then you're the one taking that responsibility. I I just have a little printout with an image of the work, and I basically say when it was created, when, the title, the date, what it was varnished with, and a little description that describes the copyright limitations, meaning that the artist holds all copyright over the artwork and reproduction of the artwork. And so
I've always included that in like a contract of sale.
Yeah,
but I guess
it's something that you don't need to include. It's more of a reminder, because by creating the artwork, I guess technically it already has copyright, or for it. I don't know if I'm using the right way of saying it, but it should happen anyway, but it's more of a reminder. And I think that the certificate of authenticity is more for the comfort of the buyer, that you are creating an object that's original and providing that confidence in your transaction.
Those are great reasons for doing it. That's awesome, Erica. Thank you.
But like you said, I don't think it's this, document that if you don't have it, then you're in trouble. I think
the art police is not going to come get you.
No. But I think that it's, it's something you can add. I also think it's helpful to, have the information about when it was created and the varnish and stuff like that. I just think it's useful for a client to know, God forbid something happens to the painting, then you at least have some information behind it. So.
I'm having so much fun. I don't want to leave this little guy, but I'm gonna have to leave him.
When we were talking about a representation of the pumpkin, Stephanie says, you're doing an improvisation or a variation. Think Mozart on the still life.
Hey.
So like a musical variation on a theme. I like that idea.
I think that's lovely.
That's cool.
Really love that. Reminds me of when we had Rachel Personet here. Her partner at the time, who was here, he was a professional tango musician and guitarist, and world renowned for what he did. And anyway, he played for us a bit, and it was absolutely amazing. And I was asking him questions about it, and he said, really, the distinction between musicians is how you create your own version of that part, what emphasis you put on what things, and how you change it while still keeping the beauty of the original song intact, which I think goes exactly in the same vein that what she's saying, and I love that. I just think that's so good, because, how many times have we heard a song, I don't know, like maybe it was like on American Idol or something, but they had their version, their twist or their character in the song, and made it uniquely theirs. Really beautiful thought.
This is a cover of a pumpkin.
This is our pumpkin cover.
We have another question here. How do you paint backgrounds, aside from value relationships, that are not boring or one solid color? I love Lewis's backgrounds. Do you use short brush strokes, broken color, transparency? How do you make a background interesting?
It was all of those.
Yeah.
If you take all of the things that you add in that last part of the question, it is all of those. I use the transparency to make some of it. I use the brush strokes and pull some across to make it feel interesting. I try to create some areas that are lighter and some areas that are darker. And if you use a mixture of color, which I did, which is ultramarine blue and oxide red, which are these two colors, when you put down it thickly, it'll be cooler and darker. and then when you lift it and have the light coming through, it gets warmer and lighter. And so you create this interesting vibration without even trying too hard. And yeah, it makes it for making fun, makes it interesting and fun to do. But yeah, the answer is all of the above. The biggest thing is it can be one color, but it is the texture that's going to make it interesting. And the larger, I think the pro tip here is the larger the amount of area of space that you're doing that same idea, the larger your brush should be. So I think some people use too small of a brush to do the same thing, and then it becomes too busy. You know, so the larger the painting, the larger your brush to do the exact same process.
I think it's a great question because often students will say, I know that I need to compress my background or compress my values, but where do I go from there, or how do I prevent it from feeling just flat and empty? And I think that thinking about value compression gives you the range in which you can play. So knowing that you're still going to have variety, but the distance between your 2 points is not going to be, it's like the width is shorter. So you're going to have temperature, variety, you're going to have transparency and opacity, etc. But the distance between the extremes will be more limited because it's in the background versus in the focal area. So sometimes, just because it's compressed doesn't mean that there's nothing going on, or there's no variety. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I was told as a student that you're not painting the wall, you're painting the air behind the model or object. You're painting the atmosphere, you're painting the light and the space around the objects or model or whatever you're painting. You're not just painting the wall.
You know what? I am stealing that, Erica. That was so good. That is so good. You are painting the atmosphere. I don't know, audience. What do you think? We need Erica to be the MC more often when she starts putting out truth bombs like that.
Just sharing my Florence Academy experience. Ooh, I like this question. I've always struggled with understanding the thought process behind making color strings like what's shown here. Are they value, chroma variations of local colors? So what thought process are you doing to create your values or to create your strings?
Ooh, yeah. Color strings, to me, in how I practice painting, are almost essential. It's funny because it looks like this big old puddle, but it really has got a lot going on. And the reason it is kind of in a puddle-oriented orientation is because it helps color harmony happen. You don't fall too crazy out of the range because you're always considering mixing it into everything else you've already mixed. So what I'm considering when I do these color strings is, first of all, every area is a designated location for something. So I have these violet hits and notes that are happening up here in the painting and in the highlights. And I have them so that I can create a little bit of a highlight note up on the top of these parts of the pumpkin. And they are, I have my orange range for the orange parts of the pumpkin. And largely this has become sort of this pumpkin, this down here. But I have the orange range for the orange notes, my violet for some of the cool notes, but then I have a green that I made right in here between them for the green notes. And that helps me keep things organized. And I always tell people it's kind of like a musical scale. Think of it as this is me going up and down the scale here, and I have a dark and a light, and I keep my palette organized that way. And then when it comes time to using the color, I know where I started and if I need to go darker or lighter on either side of it, because I know where I picked up that color. And I think that's the power of it, is knowing where you picked up the color and whether you need to go warmer, cooler, lighter, darker with your orientation. So some people, we call them makeup piles here, where you create all sorts of separate color. And there's painters who absolutely use that method, and that's totally okay. It's just the colors become more broken in orientation, which broken color is totally a thing, and it could be an easy way for you to create a broken color painting. But by doing it this way, you have more control over your value ranges and more control over the orientation of how you're controlling color in your painting. So, sorry, sometimes I lose my train of thought when I'm trying to paint a certain thing.
I think it's cool listening to how different painters approach their palettes, because often, whether they have a very rigidly organized palette or kind of in the middle or no kind of direct organization at all, there's still this mental organization happening of orienting yourself with your values. You know, like, do I need to go higher or lower, or temperature or chroma variations within that scale? Like, there's still this in your brain, there's still the mental scale that you're organizing.
Like, everything still exists within a system.
Yep.
Some are more organized than others. I think sometimes, like, you know, now, for instance, I know my palette camera isn't working, but my strings are not actually really strings. They're just clumps. And I find that tends to happen with me more when I'm Alla Prima painting, just because I'm not trying to spend time organizing my palette rather than organizing my painting. But when I'm working more indirectly, I do have a tendency to sort of almost like try to grid my paint out a little bit on my palette. Yeah, I don't know. Does that change for you, Erica, at all? Working indirectly versus directly?
I always organize my palette by value, and I'll do different strings of local color variety, but I'll consider temperature within that as well. But I'll like try to understand my full range, and then I basically go warm shadow, cool midtone, warm light, cold highlight. And so I try to, even when I have different strings, like I like to know where they are in relationship to each other. And so, and then once I'm painting, they do mix all into each other, but they still maintain the general like gradation and value. And so what this does, and I find too that if I'm painting a while, then things start to get messy, not like you know, something's mixed into something else, and the kind of like natural messy. I'm talking about like I have light next to my darkest paint, and I have dark next to my light paint, and it's just a mess. I find that the painting experience is more chaotic, and it shows up in my painting as like my values getting muddied. It's because my palette's muddied. And so I find it helpful to kind of like take a bird's eye view of my painting process while I'm painting and try to observe like when I'm getting confused or frustrated, or when things are not, I'm putting something down, it's not helping. And I look down at my palette, and often it's because my palette is messy. And so I take the moment, reorganize my palette, and I find that just taking those 2 seconds just to reorient myself ends up helping the painting go in a much smoother direction.
Yeah. Reorganizing a palette is a fabulous practice. Whether that be like resetting just by adding more color to a certain area to make it fresher, or wiping it completely and putting and starting over, or like reorganizing like your paint piles, like some people, or maybe even Erica does. Richard Schmidt did that all the time. He was notorious for doing it like all the time, where he would like mix, you know, and then almost at every break he would wipe it completely clean and then start with fresh color again, and to help keep the painting fresh. So it's a great practice to do that.
I try to toe that line between keeping things organized, yet having, and I find that when I'm organized, then I have the freedom to adjust it. Like, you know, if I know what direction I'm going in, then I can be more spontaneous, because I know I'm not gonna like go way off key, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And so I find it to be really helpful. It's one of the essential things you're taught when you're learning to paint at Florence Academy, about teaching, or the, you know, organizing your palette is one of those essential skills.
Organization leads to serendipity. I like that.
Good stuff.
And it took a while to learn it personally. I struggled. I remember this long pose vividly. Creating, it was one of my first paintings using a limited palette, and I just created like, oh my gosh, it was just orange man with like blue background. Like, my color organization, or I didn't understand how to mix up my value scales and adjust during the session, like, and how to adapt. And so I could create the value scale, but I didn't know how to
Sorry, everyone.
tweak it.
I forgot to turn my notifications off. Everybody saw my lovely wife calling me. I'm tempted to just paint a painting with just cornstalk husks in it, because I'm having so much fun with these little guys.
It's that time of year. Drive 20 minutes in any direction and you'll find something.
Yeah. There's no shortage of corn in this area. And I think the only people that have a speed is like Iowa and Indiana.
Yeah, Iowa corn. Oof. I've only ever been to Iowa once, but I thought it was really beautiful.
Yeah, my brother-in-law, who is a farmer, has done a lot of agriculture expos, because they do a lot of that over there. And he told me, he's like, it's incredible that, you know, it still has like a beautiful rural feel, and he loved that, and people were really lovely. I think that, if I remember correctly, Tim Reese moved to Iowa. I think it's close to Chicago, but I think he moved to a small town and outside of, an hour outside of Chicago, if I remember correctly.
We have a question here. Do you use transparent white for highlights?
Do I use transparent white for highlights?
Yes, that is the question.
No, I do not, but that's interesting.
What do you paint for your highlights?
Most of the time I use lead white, but I will say that titanium white is an excellent white for highlights, because it's cooler in nature and more opaque, and I particularly like my highlights to be more opaque than transparent. So that's That's how I feel about that. What
I'm
about
not
you,
sure
Evie?
Well, I'm not sure if I understand what they mean by transparent white.
Well, lead white's a little bit more transparent than titanium, but aside from that, I'm not sure if there's another white that people are they're talking about that I'm unaware of that's more transparent than lead.
Yeah, I actually only started using lead fairly recently, and I love it. Never going back. I had been using titanium prior to that, and was having a lot of trouble with flashing. And
Can you remind us what that is?
it's when the titanium pigment kind of sets into the surface, and that actually has to do with the absorbency properties of titanium itself. And it creates kind of, it's sort of like the white paint version of dark colors sinking in. And it causes your lights to become dampened, and the color kind of gets saddened, or more neutralized, if that makes sense. And lead white does not do that. Was that a okay explanation?
Yeah. So the funny thing is if I'm being completely honest, I was concentrating so hard that
You're fine.
I wasn't paying as much of attention, but I'm sure it was a great answer.
I have wanted to try playing more with flake white. I just haven't gotten around to it.
And flake white is still lead white, but just made with a different process. Is that correct?
Yes. I think it's synthesized differently. I don't know if that's the...
Are we doing flake versus stack white?
Yeah, I think also it has to do with an addition, right? Isn't there something like cremence white in flake white?
I think that one has the addition into it.
It does, okay. That's cremence white has
I
the
think
addition.
they're all lead based, but
Yeah.
Right, okay.
I will say, before I switched to using pure lead white, I've got, what is this? This lead white number 1 from Rublev. It's great, love it. I'm gonna use it forever. But before I started using that, I was actually using Michael Harding's foundation white, which is a mixture of lead and titanium. And I was actually decently happy with it. I found, I can't remember exactly what ratio of pigment they have, but there was enough lead in there that it stopped the titanium from flashing. So for anybody out there that's like kind of anxious about using pure lead, that might be a good alternative to try out.
honestly, I think that if you go on the labels for the different flake white, cremnitz white, stack white, etc., always read the label, because some will have additives, some will not, and it's not always consistent. So I'm looking at like a cremnitz white from Old Holland, and it's just lead. So.
Mm. All right, I don't know if I have enough time, but I'm going to try to get this little, what is it again, Evie? No, what's the name of the?
I think it's called a ewer.
Ewer, that's it. It is a ewer, because somebody else, when you weren't here for me to ask again, said it was a ewer too. So, might have been Alyssa. I can't remember who it was. But anyway, a ewer. So I'm going to try to get this ewer in. How much time do we have, Erica?
We have 26 minutes.
Okay, here we go. All right, I'm going to clear
Hyperspeed.
off. Let's see how fast I can put a ewer in. Boy, all the dad puns in my head are trying to come up with like me and you were things, but I'm just gonna try to hold back because I don't even have time for puns right now. All right.
But you're painting pumpkins.
All right, I'm going to try to mix some fun colors up in here.
Okay.
Okay, so I looked up transparent white by Gamblin, for example, and it has calcium carbonate in it.
Ah.
Okay, interesting.
The truth comes out.
So I think that could help create a more sculptural effect that lead could do, for example, if you wanted to create an impasto. Perhaps that's why you would use it for a highlight.
Well, and that's like, wait, I'm trying to remember, Louis, when we went to the pottery store and you got,
Gas calcium
stuff-
carbonate.
Yeah, okay, right. That's what I thought.
Yep. I added it into my self-portrait paint to give it a heavier impasto. I'm so glad that, to a degree, that this ewer is kind of tilted a little bit.
It's a little wabi-sabi.
He's a little wabi-sabi, a little cattywampus, you know, all the fun words. Because then I feel like I can be like paying no attention to the ellipse while I create this ewer.
Oh, connecting back to an earlier question, we were talking about themes.
Oh, yeah.
She was wondering if you take themes from poetry as inspiration for your work.
Oh, I gotcha.
I definitely have, both from poetry and music. I actually used to write poetry a lot. And I think maybe the crux of that is language is such an impactful media in and of itself that I think I'm really inspired by different like phrases or just different ideas. I don't know. I have a whole huge list on my phone of ideas that either inspire me or things that I think would be compelling titles, and or even like, I don't know, I'm not a great songwriter, but I do dabble occasionally. But I think that that's just a really good practice just to stay sort of creatively engaged. Just, you know, you're sitting at a red light, you think of something, write it down really quick. Yeah, I think definitely poetry and music have a big impact.
Painting is like visual poetry.
Absolutely. What about you, Louis?
Oh, I mean, I'm inspired by songs all the time, and poetry too, but I actually started listening to poetry a lot more about a year ago. I got really into it because I found a podcast that gave you a poem daily and would like break it down and talk about it, which was really enjoyable. And then I got out of the habit of listening to it, but when I was in the habit, I loved it. So it's one of those things where it's like a fun, healthy reminder to get back into something, you know? But there's a song that like really inspired me that I want to write or try to like see if I can metaphorically capture a spirit of the song in my own version of painting. I'm not trying to illustrate the song. I'm more trying to use the essence of some of the words that were really beautiful in the song to capture a mood. So, and it's one of those, it was a song that kind of like haunted me for a while. I loved the words. They were very poetic and metaphorical, but you quite didn't know what they were talking about, but you kind of did. And those to me are some of the most intriguing songs, you know.
Like it's almost tangible, but not.
Yep.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, living with a musician, it's kind of impossible for me to not be inspired by music.
Yes.
I also grew up with musicians, so, which I'm very fortunate for because I think it exposed me to a lot of music and poetry and art that I maybe otherwise wouldn't have experienced at a young age. But I think, I don't know, I think part of it is, I once heard that, like, let's see if I get this right. Some people think in linguistic terms, like they think as though they're hearing their own voice speaking, and other people think without a voice.
Yeah.
In terms of like, oh, it's just the word or the concept of the word, and I think that's always really, really fascinated me, and I wonder. I'm somebody that thinks when I think I have a voice, like it's my voice.
I'm the same way.
But I wonder how someone who was the opposite might be affected by like music and poetry with their work. Erica, do you think with a voice? Does that sound really weird? You know what I mean, right?
Yeah. No, I'm pretty sure I think with a voice. Dalen says, I left music because I couldn't write songs. Drops mic.
Oh.
Love a good pun.
That's awesome. I feel like I'm like dropping off of like conversation here because I'm trying to like focus on this guy. My apologies, but hopefully I can get this year done to some degree.
So you're not going to tell us the meaning of life?
Well, I have cured the common cold, and I was going to tell you about that, but while I have a runny nose. but you know, I'm a little distracted.
I'm just teasing.
I'm a little distracted.
That'll be the cliffhanger for the next video.
That's right. I do really enjoy painting metal, though. So much fun. These like fun little blue notes. Things happening in here.
Comparing yesterday to today, Lewis, with your palette, what challenges are you facing in full color versus a more limited palette that you had yesterday?
Yeah, that's it's one of those things where I kind of wish we had started with full color and worked our way, because it would be so much easier to go back, but to like, you get used to the idea of only having value and then like having to build into like full color in the same amount of time is, it's
You have a lot more balls to juggle.
yeah, a lot more balls to juggle. So thinking warm, cool, light and dark, you know, tonality, and switching things, make sure the tonality works. It's given me a run for my money today, because like I'm a little bit further behind than I was yesterday for sure, but still having fun. But it's definitely giving me a run.
We enjoy the struggle.
That's right. That's kind of why we paint, right? You know, if it was easy, then everyone it wouldn't be. In a way, the challenge is the enjoyable part of painting, or any challenge. Like, you know, people don't go to Everest because it tickles, you know?
You don't know that.
Maybe I do. No, but...
That's going on the quote board, I think. People don't go to Everest because it tickles.
You know, they go with a challenge.
I did see something on Instagram recently that was, the reason why I did this is because I thought it would be easier. like that's what the motivation actually was.
That's great.
We have a technical question. Would it be possible to demonstrate how a painting is finished, how painting a finished background using those methods you mentioned earlier during the Oaktober challenge? Would it be possible to demonstrate how to paint a finished background using those methods you mentioned earlier during the Oaktober challenge? Well, I think at the end, when we have the 3 days of layered painting, it'll encompass a lot of the ideas that we've talked about during this month, and then we'll have time to show how to do it in layers, and you have time to do it with a bit more completion in the last 3 days. I want to say it's the 25th through the 27th.
Yeah.
Are those dates?
That's perfect, Erica. Yep. It is. You will see it then. Our attempt at finishing the background and everything foreground, based off of the philosophies that we've been building on from the beginning. In a way, I'm kind of glad I had limited time to work on this, because the abbreviation of doing like the handle and stuff like that makes it stay fresh and interesting. Which reminds me, I'm so excited about that one brush day that, you know, where we have to use a single mark to go and then go back to our palette and pick up some more paint and make another single mark. So that's going to be fun.
We have a big question here in the last 10 minutes. How many artists have tried to paint Ophelia struggling with womanly duty and obtained agency over her own life?
Wow, that's a great question.
How many artists?
Yes.
I can only think of, I know it's been more than 2, but I can only think of 2 in my head at this moment. You know, can you think of more yourself?
I can think of a few, but I'm curious if,
Actually, I might be
you know,
able to think
taking,
of 3.
you know, taking it beyond just the story told in Hamlet, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and really taking it beyond, and thinking of the themes that of womanly duty and agency in her own life. I think, you know, adding that lens to it. I don't know. Can't think of anything. I always think that if you feel like something's missing from art history, that's your opportunity to create the painting. You know, take that energy and drive it into composing your own work. I think you could be the one to create that image.
Make it.
There you go.
Honestly, that would be a fabulous challenge that we could do in the future, is take a subject matter of art historical or in art history, an image that somebody else has done and done well, but try to find your own twist on it. Make your own sort of fan fiction of what you would do if you were to make that same subject. You know? In fact, Evie and I were talking about this. We're talking about like taking a completely different mindset and outlook on, say, like the birth of Venus or something. We were saying something about a piece that she was working on, and we were just coming up with fun ideas of where she could go with it. And the idea of taking a concept that has been used 1,000 times over, but making it your own and trying to like have it go through a different lens and perspective.
Yeah, I think that's really the fun and compelling thing about allegory is the relevance of it never really dies. I think, you know, the context changes with time, but I think there's always like a core human value that is accessible.
So you said we had roughly around 10 minutes or 8 minutes?
We have 7.
We have 7 minutes.
Oh boy.
I think the Ophelia question actually was more of a response, now that I'm reading some of the comments, more of a response to a previous question, which was paintings inspired by poetry. And so perhaps that was connected with that.
That makes sense.
Gotcha.
Oh, I've neglected these poor leaves. That's okay.
Jen here mentions Richard Schmidt and Todd Casey as both having great books. Todd Casey has
Excellent book.
great charts on color strings. Todd Casey's book is on Amazon, it's fabulous, and Richard's Alla Prima book. So,
If you were to have 2 books on your shelf, that would be it. They are. I've read Schmidt's book, and I have thumbed through Todd's. And Todd is a former GCA buddy, and I tell you, he just talk about thorough. The education he has in that book is just. He goes over so many subjects. It's hard to say all subjects because I just don't think anyone covers all subjects, but he covers the gamut of like most things you need to know that are essential in that book. So shout out to him because he's really worked hard on something that is special.
Jen also says those pumpkins are so inspiring. I picked up a couple today to paint.
Oh, good.
Thank you both so much for today's lesson.
Oh, thank you. We would love to see your pumpkins too.
That's
Send us your painting.
Just
That's
sign up
awesome.
for the Discord, everybody. Girls, if you haven't been on there, people are chatting and it's fun. You need to get on there and see what people are saying.
Yeah, but thank you from everyone here watching too.
Y'all, thank you so much for joining today. I hope you had as much fun as I did. This is just such a blast. I can't wait to see y'all's challenge and what you make. It's so inspiring and to see everybody working so hard on these challenges and this journey. So keep sharing what you're doing. We would love, love, love to see it. And as we sit here and we round the corner of this painting, where are we down to? 2 minutes? 5 minutes?
3.
3.
Whew.
3 minutes, people.
3 whole minutes.
Y'all, thank you so much for joining today. Tomorrow, we are going to do drapery. We're so excited. I'm always inspired by like some of the ones that like Leonardo da Vinci did and some of the old master drawings. We'll be painting it, but you're welcome to draw. That is the next subject around the corner. Please join us for that. It's going to be fun, exciting, interesting, and intriguing. It's going to be all the things. At least I hope it's interesting and intriguing. And this is where we're going to end it. Thank you all so much for joining, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.